Welcome to the Danny Clinkscale Reasonably Irreverent podcast. Insightful and witty commentary, probing interviews, and detours from the beaten path.
Every once in a while, we have to bring out the big dog.
Yeah.
Oh, God help us. It's time for Danny Unleashed. Sponsored by Easton Roofing, where integrity matters. Go to eastonroofing.com for more.
Yes, Joe Spiker and his team, they're the best. I mentioned I was chatting with Joe the other night. You know, they're one of the fastest growing companies around because they're the best. Check out their Google reviews. You will see just how happy people are after working with Easton Roofing. You're talking about very, very happy customers with Easton Roofing, like Danny and I. Both of us have had work done on our roofs by Joe Spiker. My mom is getting ready to have work done on her roof by Joe and his great team at Easton Roofing. In fact, right now is a great time to call Easton Roofing. You know, you got the ice coming. That's going to be very damaging to any roofs that already have problems. The water gets in there, freezes, and just makes it even worse. All of a sudden, you got a frozen leak coming down into your house. You do not want that. Get a free inspection, a free estimate right now by calling Joe and the guys at Easton Roofing, and the gals, by the way. I don't want to forget Taylor, Kaylee, Sam. They're in the office, 913-257-5426. Their lovely voices are the first ones you will hear in getting the process going. All over the metro, including Lawrence and Topeka. No payment is ever collected until you're 100% satisfied, and believe me, you will be 100% satisfied with the work done by Easton Roofing. Call them today. Over 1,000 jobs done this year already. 1,000 jobs all over the metro, including Lawrence and Topeka at Easton Roofing. Find them online at eastonroofing.com. Mr. Clinkscale, sir, how are you?
Doing fine, Soren. Thanks for asking. Just want to do a quick shout-out to start off. Last night, the Public Relations Society of America Greater Kansas City chapter gave out their PRISM Awards, and the Reasonably Irreverent podcast won a silver medal in the podcast,
good for you, buddy.
In the podcast
Congrats.
category. And the thing that made me extra happy about it is the fact that it's voted on by an association that's not from here, so they don't know who the hell I am, and they still like the podcast. It was actually voted on by the PRSA of Mississippi.
Do you think the fact that they didn't know who you are helped?
I don't know. They're
just
quite
falling over each other to get to that one, by the way. Falling
They're
over
rather personal
each other.
podcasts, so I guess they sort of have to have a feel that they like me a little bit. But
Yeah, of course.
I don't want to go all Sally Field here at the Oscars, but if anybody remembers that old-timey reference.
You like me. You really like
You
me.
really like me.
I
I was not lost on you.
No, it was not. I'm old.
Right.
I know what's going on. Danny. I
Older.
catch the references. Curtis is the guy that will drop references from like the 70s. I remember, what was it, last week, Jed? You had to pull him aside and say, "Hey, the Lenny and Squiggy jokes don't play anymore."
No, my favorite one was when
Hello.
we were trying to do protest songs one day for Frank Opinions, and I told Curtis, no one's going to get that. That reference is too old with this Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young song. And then Frank goes, nobody's going to know that. That's from back in my day. And Curtis was like, no, everybody will get that. That's a brilliant song. Nope, no one got it.
Although classic rock still lives for whatever. I was in a location the other day doing some work and an appearance, and I was treated, I guess is the word, to 5 hours of classic rock over the intercom. Now, thankfully, most of the songs are at least familiar, and they're not bad, but, I mean, it's like, oh, that old chestnut again. Hey.
And one more.
Yeah.
And one more.
So anyway.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So anyway.
I want to ask you, I want to start with some sporting, if you don't mind.
Sure. Actually, I was going to bring that up.
Because I didn't get to it.
Yeah.
I didn't get to it, and so I want to discuss it now and maybe play a little bit of Peter Vermees here. You know, first of all, not the ruling. It's not a Supreme Court that was deciding this. The decision was made that they're going to go with points per game instead of points accumulated, and it's a pandemic, right? So everything's having to be done on the fly, so nobody can really bitch. This does hurt Sporting, though, and hurt their chances at getting the number one seed. It pushes Seattle in front of them because they've got the higher points per game. And I can't say it's unfair. I think it's a fair way to do things. It just doesn't benefit my team.
The only way that you would see it as unfair is if you feel like there's some culpability for a team that's played less games and they are benefiting by it. I think there's a little bit of thought about
by not being judicious.
Right. I think there's a little blowback about Colorado maybe who's benefiting from this. But since they have not been ruled by the league to have not followed protocols, then that's fine. But I think that's probably the controversial aspect of it. If people say, hey, this team played all their games because they did everything right, and this team over here missed 3. I don't think anybody's going to miss that many, but they missed 3 because they were, they didn't do what they were supposed to. I think that, that's just murky territory because you can get COVID doing everything absolutely right.
Yeah. But I do think it would be nice to know what the rules were going in. Right? Give me 17, Jed. We'll play this. Because, Peter talked a lot about the points per game, and I said, well, if you'd have known what it was going to be, right? If you'd have known that it was going to be a points per game, because you might handle it differently. It's like, you got a tie game. Do you push forward more as opposed to saving for a point? I said, if you knew that this was how it's going to work, is there any spot or any game or any situation where you would have done something differently along the way?
It's not like I go into a game and say, hey, let's just see if today we can, lose by a little or for sure just tie this game. Obviously, when you're playing a game and you feel that maybe things aren't going so well, or you're just hanging on in the last few minutes and you're trying to just get out of there with a point or secure the 3 points, you might make some changes. I'm sure there were some games that maybe we would have done some things differently, based on knowing that. But I don't think it's like this overall change. I just think you can't tell when anybody's going to get COVID right now, and obviously that's the reason for this. So nobody wanted any team to have to. You had Dallas and Nashville in the Orlando tournament. Unfortunately for Colorado, they had during the season, which they didn't want to miss games, and I understand their plight as well. Where I think the difficulty is it's the fact that we all won't play the same number of games. You look at the schedule congestion that you had to go through. There's a lot of things. So there's so many different things that you couldn't even say that any of this would have helped it. I hate the phrase, but it is what it is. We're just going to have to get on with it and see where we end up in the playoffs, and hopefully we wind up with some type of home field advantage at some point, and that's what we got to work towards.
And that is what they have to do. It is what it is, but it is frustrating, and I think it speaks to, we'll all be better prepared for any kind of disruption in the future for having gone through some disruption, because we haven't had any disruption to our lives in a long, long time, and so I get it, and I think this team. It'd be unfortunate if they end up losing on PKs on the road in the playoffs where they could have been playing at home, just because I think right now they might very well be the best team in the MLS.
They certainly are playing like that. They're playing with confidence and swagger, and even when they don't play particularly well, they're pulling out results. I don't think the game the other day was anything to feast your eyes on, but they came out with the result, and then the game before they, just annihilated their opposition. They're dangerous going forward. Now they're getting healthier. So I think that, I think you can absolutely make an argument for it.
Do you think that their high press the last 2 games has been outstanding? And is that a product of just the other team sucked at playing out of their back line? Or no, they can high press anybody?
I think they have a team that can high press most every team. There's teams that actually kind of like that because they'll play the ball over the top. But I think in MLS they're few and far between. For instance, you don't want to play high press against Man U in the Premier League because they've got too much pace and they like to play the ball over the top. But I think they've got a healthy and deep lineup. They can go to reserves if guys can't, go hard for the full 90.
They've got extra
90 minutes,
as does everybody else.
And they've got extra subs, and they're getting healthy. So, I think in general, if you do it well, it's a tremendously effective way to play right now because teams now want to play out of the back. They don't want to just boot the ball out of there. They want to try to play it out of there. That's the new cool thing to do. And sometimes I think people do it to a fault. And not everybody has a keeper who's great with the ball that way. They may be a great shot stopper. For instance, I think Tim Melia is improved in that regard, but his true best skill is as a shot stopper, not as a distributor.
He's gotten better. He's worked at it. He had a couple of bad turnovers that just created gimme goals a couple of years ago, I remember.
Yep.
But to me, so I think up front, the press looks really good. But the big reason for sporting fans to get excited, and if you're not a fan, to jump on board, and why it'd be a good time to jump on board, is their back line. Like, I don't like saying, that we've maybe come to the end of the time with Matt Beasler and Graham Zusi. And Zusi's hurt. I recognize that. But I'm sorry, Zusi was making a lot of mistakes or getting beaten
and
a number of times.
Yeah, and sometimes, the mistakes don't always have to be costly, but in his case, they had been.
They were. And so I don't think it's a coincidence that both those guys are out and they've played better back there. There comes a time where you just can't cover the ground. And I think the league is much better. Think about this. I mean, how much better do you think the league is over the last 12 years?
Incredibly better.
Leaps and bounds.
It still is a league where, I think a couple things have happened in the last year, for instance, that
well, let me finish this point though, and then we'll dig deeper on that. But my point to that was those guys are not getting any younger, and the league has gotten better around them. It's a testament. They have gotten better as players to stay in this league, right? To stay top flight players in this league. But now I think it's a combination of the league continues to get better. I think there's better firepower in this league, and then they're now starting to lose a step, and it's important for Sporting to keep up. Now, it doesn't mean that they don't have a role and they couldn't be valuable subs, that they can't still play a part. I know Zusi's not this year, but if he is back next year. But, when you think about a league that got better and better and better, what if you're a quarterback and you start playing and you're playing in the MAC, and they slowly add in Big Ten talent, then they slowly add in NFL talent. In the end, you're playing in NFL football and you started in the MAC. That might be an exaggeration of how far the talent's come, but I'm making a point here. You're the same linebacker, but now you're having to tackle Barry Sanders instead of Barry Shecky.
Barry Sobel.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly. But to your point about the league,
well, I think a couple of things that just popped into my head right away is that Zlatan came to this league, and I think people thought it was on a retirement trip, and he scored about a goal a game. He was great. But then he's gone over to Inter Milan, and he's playing in Serie A, and he's scoring about a goal a game. I mean, he's their best player. So, I mean, it's not like that level of play was. Now, I'm not saying that MLS is Serie A. Don't get me wrong. And then the other thing is that Chicharito.
And what is Serie A, just for people who aren't
the
soccer?
Italian league.
Right. But it's the highest Italian league.
Yeah, it's absolutely the highest Italian league. And it's got Inter Milan and Juventus, world-class teams that are usually very good in the Champions League. So it's a very good league. It used to be the best league in the world, like in the 70s and 80s. Now, actually into the 90s. But anyway, and then Chicharito comes to this league this year, and he's not doing much. In fact, all the questions to Alan Pulido the other day were about, why aren't you the striker for Mexico instead of Chicharito? So, if guys just don't waltz in here, and of course I'm sort of being counterintuitive there because one guy played great here and the other guy hasn't, but it's what I'm getting at is it's not easy. And this used to be seen as a retirement league, and I think you have to be a little bit better than that. And the brief stints for players like Wayne Rooney and Steven Gerrard, I think they came over and they're like, well, this is still hard, and the travel's not as easy as it was when I was in England,
right.
and they just pack it up and go home.
Yeah. No, I agree.
I think the younger player, their teams are finally starting to bear fruit from their academies, particularly teams like Dallas. and Sporting Kansas City, for that matter. And,
yes.
And so the league,
Peter talked about that today.
They're developing their own talent. And I was listening to the Sirius channel today, Soccer Channel, and
thanks.
They were talking about during a break.
Appreciate it.
During a break.
Appreciate it. Okay, all right.
But they were talking about how some teams in the league don't go out of market to try and recruit players for their academies. Well, Sporting's done that. They've gone to North Carolina and gotten a very good player on their team now.
No, they didn't. No, they didn't. He was here. He was in their territory.
Wasn't he raised in North Carolina and then they brought him here?
Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. He was in their territory.
Know what I mean? Say no more.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I see what you're saying.
No. Let's talk about it. I'm not gonna. It's not my job to cover up their behind the scenes dealings. And actually, Peter Vermees has been asked about it, and he goes, "You want to talk about what's going on with the Galaxy?" I mean, he's like, "Okay, you want to talk about how things work? Let's talk about how things work." I get the feeling that there's a lot of things he'd like to discuss that are going on with some of the other moves that are around there. Like Zlatan is one of them. Like I'll bet you if you got Peter Vermees some truth serum and out there and you asked him, do you think Zlatan really only got $1 million to go to the Galaxy? He would just give you a detailed breakdown of the Swiss bank accounts or the Caribbean account that got him here. Like, everyone, no, he came here because he wants to increase his brand. Yeah, he came to America for 8 months because now what? He's doing $1 billion worth of Zlatan T-shirts? Bite my ass.
No,
something went down there.
No,
okay.
Worldwide, he's his brand is fine, and he's going over to Italy and building his brand now. I mean, just the evidence.
Yeah, but what is it?
Sporting had to play.
But that's my point. What do you mean built his brand? Like, people know his name, but is there a wave? Did he make $100 million
No,
in T-shirt sales?
He did not. He did not, and just the evidence that Sporting had.
So there's no way he came over here for $1 million.
I agree with that. Yeah, I was just Sporting had to pay $9 million for Alan Pulido.
Right.
Now he's a great player, but he's not Zlatan.
No, but so my point is, you're talking about Busio's, the one
right.
from North Carolina, who's a homegrown player, and yeah, they cook some books here and there, but there's a lot of book cooking going on everywhere. I mean, there's a little bit of NASCAR. If you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. When it comes to your homegrown talent. I mean, who is the other one? Daniel Shalhoub is a homegrown player.
Right.
Where were his formative years, Danny?
Not here.
Hungary.
Right.
But he's homegrown. So, listen, whatever the nuances are, I'm all for Sporting taking it into the gray, right? This is like we talk about. And by the way, isn't it a lot better to talk about, they did some shenanigans maybe to get a North Carolina kid and Busio into their academy. And by the way, Busio got paid, and we don't have to have an FBI investigation to figure out,
right.
Whether or not a shoe company gave somebody something.
No, because they are allowed to give him something.
Because they're all pros. It's all maybe they broke an MLS rule here or there, but we're not running around deciding that the coach Peter Vermees he's just an oily pig because he got a kid $10,000 for shoes and spare me. It's all on the up and up. Everybody knows it's a business, and maybe it's one day. The Galaxy will get fined or Sporting will get fined for something that goes on, but it'll all be in the world of a professional sport.
Right, and there's a lot of talk about just opening up the country and not having not having homegrown players in the league. That if you have but right now it's cost prohibitive to scout talent at that level. 13, 14 years old, 15 years old, all around the country. I mean, teams don't have a budget to have 1,000 scouts or something like that.
I wonder. We'll have to ask Peter which side he'd be on that, because I've asked Dayton, what would you be for a world draft? He said, I'm for eliminating the draft. Dayton said, let us scout it, and whoever finds the guy and is committed and convinced that he's the player, let us pay him whatever we want to pay him.
I think it's a bad idea for Kansas City. I'll say that.
That's what I think too. But it sounds to me like Dayton feels like, fine, the Yankees will pour all this money into one or two kids that are supposedly can't misses, but there is no such thing as a can't miss, right?
No, there isn't. But they can also throw numbers at it. I mean, the Yankees have been great recently, but back in the 30s and 40s, they were unbeatable.
I agree with you, but for Dayton Moore to have said that, and maybe this has been 5 or 6 years ago that he said this to me, and maybe he would say, well, in today's climate, I now believe this. But at the time, because I peppered him on it a little bit, I'm like, well, why wouldn't they just be able to buy more guys? He's like, because you can't cover them all. Because he said they can't. They don't have even they don't have the budget. He said to try to squat on all the talent, it would bank. He said there'd be no money left to pay the guys up top. He said there is a limit to what they can do. He goes, that's fine. He goes, to put it into a stars ranking type of category, right? Like we talk about a 5-star kid and a 4-star kid. There aren't enough. They don't have enough money to cover all the 5 stars.
Right, and I think that the period I was talking about when the Yankees and the Cardinals had these voluminous farm systems with 8 levels of teams, they didn't have to pay those guys beans. I mean, they wouldn't pay them any, their signing bonus would be $100 or something. Now, if you're going to get top flight talent in the current environment with college baseball a viable option, then you would have to pay them considerable bonus money, and that to your point or to Dayton's point, you couldn't do that to 150 guys.
All right, I want to wrap up this segment with this. Jalen Lindsey is from North Carolina as well. The North Carolina thing didn't require any shenanigans like Shallowy did. He's using my terms, using my words, because I'm going to tell you who this is in a minute. These are not his words. He's quoting me. North Carolina isn't any MLS team's territorial rights, so the kids are fair game. And he says they do have to get rid of those territorial rights. I know for a fact there are those that are interested in giving away, getting rid of those. So from this standpoint, it sounds like Peter would probably be in favor of getting rid of them and saying, okay, let's go find the best of the best. I thought, we'll have to ask him. It's a deeper conversation. It's kind of an off-season conversation, when you got games and you're trying to get somewhere now. But he got into the young players today, and it was interesting stuff. There's no doubt. All right, we'll take a break. Come back. Danny Clinkscale's with us. It's Danny Unleashed. He's brought to you by our friends at Easton Roofing, Joe Spiker and his great team, residential and commercial roofing. Listen, no matter what your business is, they're working on a couple of high rises down by the plaza. Heavy equipment, no problem. They got it. And every employee is an Easton Roofing employee. They're not just contracting out, subcontracting to some other company that doesn't really care, doesn't have their name on it. Easton Roofing is Easton Roofing. They will get the job done better than anybody in the city. You can find them online at eastonroofing.com or call 913-257-5426.
More of Danny's Reasonably Irreverent podcast after this.
We're here with Joe Spiker, the CEO and president of Easton Roofing. And Joe, you had a great year in 2019, a record year. 2020 comes, things are moving smoothly along, and then the coronavirus comes. But your company seemed to be very ready, very proactive, and very ready to serve your customers well.
Yeah, we adopted social distancing very early before the cities even put out the notices. And we started working from home. We are largely cloud-based as a company, so that transition was easy. Our technicians are wearing masks and gloves, and salespeople are not meeting with homeowners. We're doing everything digitally and doing everything we can to do our part to get over this as quickly as possible.
So for any needs that people have right now, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Well, you can always call us, 913-257-5426. But the best way is to go to eastonroofing.com, put your information in, and we'll give you a call.
Easton Roofing. Integrity matters.
All right, the good sense. End of the hour answer. Before the Astros this past season, who was the last team to change managers after playing in a World Series?
Is it the Royals?
They had to go a few months into the season. I know the Red Sox fired their manager in season, the season after they went to the World Series in 1975, but that's not right after.
Not necessarily firing, change managers. Have a different manager the year after winning.
Oh,
Marlins?
The Yankees in the early 60s, I think, changed managers after they won a championship.
No, somebody must
been
have
within the
retired.
last 10 years. Could be
Giants?
timely.
Oh, Tony La Russa.
The Cardinals in 2012, after La Russa retired, interestingly enough, both guys in question, Hinch and La Russa, hired within the last 24 hours in the American League Central. La Russa will be managing against his former player and protege, Mike Matheny. So some interesting before-game conversations in the AL Central this coming season, if that's allowed.
You think so?
If that's allowed.
Do you think?
Well, yeah. I mean, if they get around to where guys can actually hang out and talk before the games.
That's right, yeah. Good Sense Subs, that's what we were giving away there. GoodSenseSubs.com is the website. Make sure you're part of the loyalty club. And make sure you got the app. It's the quickest, fastest way to do it. We've got, I think, soccer this weekend. We love to take out the phone, click, click, click. All my favorites are in there. I click them up, pick the time. ASAP is 20 minutes later, and then you swing by and grab your sandwiches. They are ready to go. I did it, in fact, just the other day. I took some sandwiches over to my in-laws yesterday. Yesterday it was. You can get it right now. GoodSenseSubs.com. Make sure you're part of that loyalty club as well. Danny Clinkscale's with us, brought to you by Easton Roofing. How about it, Danny? You like the managerial hires that are going around here these days?
Well, I think it's arguable, in some people's mind, whether a team should have jumped after just a year on A.J. Hinch, but I think he's a fine manager. I do. I think he handles things in a tremendous way. I think he has a great manner about him. I think he's a good manager, as they would say in soccer. And I think he has enough of the touch of analytics. He was a front office person, so I think he's a great hire. And I tend to think, from what I've heard of him recently, when I've heard him, Tony La Russa to me still sounds sharp, and if so, I think that's a fine hire. I don't think it's, he's not going to manage forever again, but I think for a team that, got a dose of a good manager, I think, last year, that this is another step. I expect, at least for the upcoming season, that to be a real positive move.
You think La Russa at 76 is still able to manage today's player? 9 years out of the biz?
Yes, I do. I
have zero fault with A.J. Hinch.
Yeah,
he served his penalty. He's available. There should have been a line around the block to get him. Once baseball says it's okay, then it's okay. Let's go.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm just saying I understand if somebody's like, huh? Apparently, there's a lot of executives around baseball thinking that they shouldn't have pulled the trigger that fast. It's a bad look. But he's a good manager, and they're a team that I think is on the cusp. So
the questions I hear about La Russa is not necessarily that 76 is too old to run a baseball team or whatever. He's very much been a guy who's doesn't like stylish, doesn't like stepping out. He wasn't a fan of the Fernando Tatis bat flip, or the grand slam on the 3-0 this year. He's kind of had the history. Now, he did manage Ricky Henderson, and he managed Albert Pujols, who would occasionally do things like that, I guess. But he's going to be managing a team that's full of very young, very expressive players. Tim Anderson, like the king of the bat flip this year. Is there some kind of a disconnect there? And also,
yes.
Yeah,
I think he's just going to have to. I think he's going to be smart enough to adjust.
And the
How about this one? Rick Hahn has been successful. I'm not a huge Rick Hahn fan, the guy, because he didn't like my questions at when they do the Cactus League powwow where they have all the managers, general managers available, and nobody was asking him questions, so I just started peppering him with stuff. And then somebody else came around. He listens to them. Then the guy didn't have a question, so I keep asking. And he kept stopping. He's like, "Do you have a question? Do you have a question?" He kept wanting somebody else to ask him. I'm like, "Dude, you got to be here one way or another, right?" So, and I'm not asking you, "Oh, Cubs, man, do you hate the Cubs?" Like, I'm asking you real questions, for God's sake. And I do cover a team that's in your division. Anyway, so I'm not a Hahn fan, but he's been very successful in rebuilding his team. And you think Tony La Russa is not going to come in and he wants his hands on everything. Plus, he's just spent the last 9 years being a special advisor, and he ran the Diamondbacks as their president of baseball or whatever his title was. You think you're not going to be butting heads? This looks to me like Jerry Reinsdorf is getting old and senile. And he's like, God, man, I wish I'd kept La Russa all those years ago. Well, let's just hire him now. I think I go in pessimistic with La Russa having to prove that this is a good idea.
I guess I'm leaning toward for the short term. I'm leaning towards it's a good move. I could be dead right now. I have far more confidence that A.J. Hinch is a good hire. Absolutely.
It's just will they have the talent? The White Sox.
I'm looking at something right now that
go.
says White Sox choose Tony La Russa over A.J. Hinch. Now, if that's true, that's just bad business.
Jeff Passan said yesterday that they never interviewed anybody but Tony La Russa.
Yeah,
Which,
so that if
that's a
that story looks like it's wrong, if it was right, it would be a disastrous decision.
And also one of the things, I mean, La Russa is always known as being like the in-game strategist, but that's not really what managers are to that extent anymore, is it?
No.
Well, no. I think that we see much more of a reliance, like we saw in Game 6 of the World Series, on what has transpired in the past, as opposed to the feel of the game right then. And a lot of what his book is, or the book about him is about, is how he was always one or two steps ahead of the other guy during a game. Well, I think you're right. There is less of that these days. No question.
I think he was one or two steps ahead of the other guy because he was into the numbers more than anybody was back in the day. But then the numbers guys dove way deep, and they got teams of brainiacs to go get super deep into it and give him the data. And he liked, as I recall from that book, it's been a long time since I read the book, was that he was, he did more studying than anybody. Like, wasn't that what that book was about? Is like he studies more,
right.
To which to me was like, okay, he knew all the numbers and the tendencies and this guy against that guy, and that's when, and when I do this, they'll do that. Like, he'd played that out, but that's all done by computer now.
And I think in some regards a little bit to a fault. I'm not one of these, it's gone too far in analytics. But I do think that what has gone on before is important in your assessment of what is going on today, but you can't ignore what is going on today.
Yeah, no, I agree. I've said, like, the math, if everybody does the math, then nobody's going to win, right? And that's the thing, is like, it's blackjack. Like, I can play, by the rules, and I'm not saying people should be hitting 18s or something. You play blackjack, but the only way you're going to really make money is by being aggressive at certain points. You've either got to go, okay, crap or get off the pot time, I'm taking my bet up times 5 right now, and we're going for it. Or you're super aggressive with the splits and double downs and that kind of thing, and you catch your card. That's the only way you're going to actually make money. Otherwise, it's just a matter of time before you're drained. And, I think it's the same way with the analytics. You have all the analytics, but then you got to have, normally we take Snell out here, but this is the time I'm going to go with him. My frustration on the Snell thing is if you even thought you might take him out and not give him a third time through if he was going well, if you're like, if he was up 7-0, he would have seen bets, right? But if you thought in a one-run, like, to me, the beauty of the Rays is everything is thought out before the game and you don't have to react. Well, if you ever thought at any moment that you would come up the third time through and because the game was close and Snell was throwing BBs, you wouldn't keep him in there, then you should have started an opener.
I agree with that, because then you get past the part of the lineup you didn't like. Now, in my mind, you want to start Blake Snell because he's your stud and he's been pitching well. But don't and the problem for Snell is usually that he throws a lot of pitches because he strikes a bunch of people out. Well, that wasn't. He was still striking people out, but he was doing so economically. Yeah. He hadn't thrown very many pitches, so. An innings thing, he had the Dodgers. It was more an aspect of you're watching the game and you could tell the Dodgers had no clue, and they were frustrated. And afterwards, they openly said they were thrilled that he went out of the game.
Yeah, I know. He's one of the guys. I do believe where baseball's going is you're going to have guys that are 18 batter guys, whether they're the first 18 batters or their batter number 4 to 22. They're going to be 2 times through the order, and that's what's going to replace your starters. And then in and amongst those will be the truly elites that are guys that can actually pitch you a complete game. Won't happen often. You'll still go to the pen more often than not, but they're the guys that can start and go through a lineup 3 times. There'll be 27 guys, and Blake Snell is one of those guys.
I totally agree.
The Royals at this point don't have any of those guys, although Brady Singer shows promising signs of being one of those guys. Right now, you would say he's an 18-batter guy. But Blake Snell, with the Cy Young and the kind of stuff he has, is a guy that's more than 18 batters.
And on a night he's cooking. I mean, it's not.
And when it's this or die, and he's not going to pitch the next day. He's not going to pitch until spring training anyway.
He's got plenty of rest for opening day.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, I thought it was absolutely the wrong move. Absolutely the wrong move.
We will take a break. More with Danny Clinkscale. It's Danny Unleashed. We get into the Chiefs next. Danny, always brought to you by our good friends at Easton Roofing, residential and commercial projects. 4 straight years voted best of houses. They're an Angie's List Super Service Award, the biggest commercial project, or, hey, your little house. My mom's little house, she calls it my little house in Prairie Village. They'll be happy to take care of you no matter what it is. Call 913-257-5426. Get a free inspection and, if needed, a free estimate on any repairs or a new roof. Right now, with Easton Roofing, integrity matters.
More of Danny's Reasonably Irreverent podcast after this.
We're here with Joe Spiker, the CEO and president of Easton Roofing. What's the difference at this time of year as we head toward the warmer months for homeowners, and what should they be looking at, coronavirus or not?
If you didn't do a good job of home maintenance in the fall, cleaning your gutters out, when we get the spring rains, that can be a real problem. So you want to make sure that you've done a good job on your home maintenance, cleaning your gutters out. We can help with that. I always tell people they never get their roof inspected. They get their furnace inspected once a year, but they never get their roof inspected. And we do the inspection on your roof for free. So you call, you make an appointment, and we'll show up, do the inspection. It's free. You should have your roof looked at once a year. Take advantage of us. And most likely you're fine. And if there's a problem, hopefully we can get out in front of it and save you money in the end.
So for any needs that people have right now, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Well, you can always call us, 913-257-5426. But the best way is to go to eastonroofing.com, put your information in, and we'll give you a call.
Easton Roofing, integrity matters.
You're listening to the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB. Soren, Petro with you, courtesy of Jed Marshall. Danny Clinkscale, it's Danny Unleashed, proudly brought to you by our friends at Easton Roofing. Integrity matters. Danny, this game against the Jets poses virtually no threat, although Curtis did point out 0-7 teams have come to Kansas City 3 times, and they're 3-0.
The team's 0-7.
Right? Wasn't that the stat,
Yep. 1975 Chargers were 0-10. The 84 Oilers were 0-10, and the 2011 Dolphins were 0-7, and all 3 of them won. The 11 Dolphins behind Matt Moore, who was in for the injured Chad Henne. Going to have fun with that.
Danny, do you find it as interesting, that I ask Curtis a question and he quickly cracks the mic to then just breathe heavily on it and then not answer the question until prompted yet a second time?
I think sometimes he's waiting. He's breathing heavily to indicate that he's here
I'm ready to go.
Ready to go. Since you are in a different location.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Well, it works.
Yes,
it definitely works. I will tell you that. So, what do we take away from this game? I'm personally on to Carolina.
Well, I think the Chiefs literally could throw their jocks out there and win this game. I mean, it's just. I mean, they'd have to do so many things wrong and get down in the mire. I mean, the only way the Jets win this game is if it's they kick a bunch of field goals and it's 15-14 somehow. Butker misses a couple. I mean, what scenario can they have to? There has to be a non-offensive touchdown for them to have any possibility of them.
I don't.
No, there's none. I'm just saying.
There's none.
There's almost no way to conjure it up. A pick six.
Yeah,
one of those things that you have to have them all, like K-State or something. A pick six, a kick return, and something else.
My fear is injury. Right. I want them to bury the Jets 42-0 at the half, and none of the big boys play the rest of the way.
That certainly is a nice goal. It doesn't usually seem to fall into the way the Chiefs have played this year.
Should that concern us that they haven't had the big offensive show?
I think it should concern that they sort of have futzed around on offense, either that or been just I'm not going to say figured out, but it takes them a little while. It seems to. Figure out what's going on the other side or make adjustments to it or realize it's not going to be that easy. But in this case, the Jets had a few good players and got rid of most of them. They have a very motivated player on their team to lug the football against them if they just want to go basic. Yeah, I don't even know if Chiefs fans are going to have fun with this game.
Yeah. I think Andy Reid, this is a game where Andy Reid could come out and be super vanilla and just try to say, we're going to out-talent them, and I don't want to put anything on tape, and I'm not really for that. I'm for blow them up quick and fast and get the big boys out.
The only issue is that NFL teams are so reticent to getting guys off the field. I mean, that's the problem. I mean, I was almost astounded when Chad Henne went in last week. I mean, they almost never do it.
If you're not going to throw the ball, a quarterback can be pretty protected just handing off.
Yeah, he can, but he could still get rolled up on or some dumb thing like that, or have a bad exchange. I mean, things can still happen. There's no reason not to get these guys out when you're up 4 touchdowns or something, but they tend not to do it. I mean, they're paranoid. So the best you're usually going to get is a quarter off from the big boys, as you put it. Even if they were, if they're ahead 31, I almost used the D word, 31 Nick at the half.
Richard,
the starters are
Richard.
The starters are playing in the third quarter. They just are. I'd like to say they weren't, but they would be.
No, to my point earlier, I'm on to Carolina. Let's go. And to be honest with you, and this is where the look ahead thing I think does come around. Although I think there may be, if Le'Veon Bell is getting along well with his teammates, there may be, hey, let's go crush the Jets for Le'Veon.
Right. Yeah.
But I'm kind of on to the Raiders, which is a month away basically, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Because it's like the Jets, Carolina, bye, then the Raiders. Let's go. I'm ready for that game right now because Carolina's they're a decent little team, but they should not pose any problem for the Chiefs, which means they should get to the break sitting at 8-1, right?
I don't see any reason why not. I mean, they have a few tough games left, but all you want to do is enjoy those tough games where you have something to look forward to going in, not games like this piece of crap.
This podcast was made possible by our great sponsors like
Easton Roofing, the presenting sponsor of Kansas City Profiles at the Danny Kling Scale Reasonably Irreverent podcast. Easton Roofing, where integrity matters.
We hope you enjoyed the latest Danny Kling Scale Reasonably Irreverent podcast. Come back soon for something fresh and new.